me what success means to you. Is it a car? Is it a house? Maybe a dollar amount? Is it future? Is it now? Or a level of clout? Got my eyes in the skies like my head in the clouds. I fully accept endowed power like the profound beauty of a flower. It's already there, it's always been. Watch the sunrise, just let the fresh air and sweet water come in the perfect amount so growth abounds. Not only talking about bank accounts, but knowledge, understanding, being wise, full of compassion. Yeah. It's time to live my dreams while I'm awake and even while I'm sleeping. The truth is constantly speaking and leading. I'm focusing on my purpose, no longer questioning if it's worth it. Beating down the doubt that keeps lurking. I gotta keep going, gotta keep working. Always be learning, always be searching for the truth while lies try to seduce. Cause I'm a champion. Are you a champion?
Yeah, I'm a champion. Are you a champion?
Yeah, I'm a champion. Are you a champion?
Yes, indeed. You can't mess with my
Hello, and welcome to the Q&A for this year's LGBTQ Shorts Showcase. My name is Arzhang Zafar. I am one of the program directors at PATH, and I am going to ask that my guests introduce themselves. Go ahead, Hussein.
Hello, Namaste. I'm Prem Prasad Adhikari, producer of the short film Confusion. Confusion was the film school project that I did last year with Asuka Aryal, say the director and writer of this short film. Currently, I'm happy to be part of this festival, Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. I'm collaborating with her with my next project. Right now, we're working on the post production titled The Black Stone. Thank you.
Akim, you can go next.
Hi, yes. I'm Akim Mendoza. I'm currently calling in from Los Angeles, but I'm originally from the Philippines. I moved here a couple months ago, and I pitched Connection as this multilingual TikTok musical battle between two rivals, social media influencers. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. It's great to be among some really great filmmakers, and I'm just excited to have a chat with them.
Jiyoon?
Hi, my name is Jiyoon, or Mary. I am the director for Hodgin Blooms, and I'm really excited to be a part of this Queer Shorts program and to be amongst like great filmmakers as well. I'm also calling in from just like the OC area in Southern California. Yeah.
And Sajid, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy that my film will be screened in Philadelphia Asian American. I'm from Iran. Thank you.
Great. So I think what we're going to do is first have some individualized questions and then move on to more general stuff as we go. But to start, I actually just want to get through the basics and ask you all basically where did the ideas for these particular shorts come from? And then could you talk a little bit about how you kind of brought those ideas to life? Whoever feels like jumping in first can jump in.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Actually, Confusion is this film school project. Being a filmmaker, being a female filmmaker from Nepal, she always tried to bring the stories, suppress desire of the people, especially the woman that she has seen and in her surroundings, when she pitched me idea, so I love the idea, so I decided to produce it because it become some sort of universal appealing in the story, and it's basically the story is set in the rural village of Nepal. Most of the ladies they are deprived to choose their life partner before they get married. No? So before they get married, their parents will decide their life partner. So the story becomes so universal, and I felt some unique emotions out of it. So I decided to produce it. Uh, she, as a female filmmaker, she tried her best to explore as much as she can from the woman's perspective, what she has observed in her surrounding. Thank you.
Yeah, I can go next. I started writing Connection when I was still in the Philippines. I was taking my master's at USC, but because of the pandemic, I couldn't be in the US physically. And so the whole process was exhausting because I had classes from 12 midnight until like 9 a.m. And when it was time for me to write my first major short of my program, I was like, I have to take advantage of this time zone thing that I'm currently at. And that's how Connection was born. And I wrote it in a way that I could shoot it in the Philippines or in Los Angeles if I had the chance to move. And so, yeah, that's how it all came about. And it's yeah, that's how Connection started.
Hadron Blooms is about a personal experience that I had while I was attending a Presbyterian church from middle school to high school. It was a really conservative church, one to a point where they told us that if we were gay, we had to pray to God so that we could convert ourselves to be straight. So there were a lot of like things that we had to conform to, and it came out of like a desire of like just wanting to speak out about like the power dynamics in a church that exist, and just kind of my own anger about all the kinds of kids who had to listen to these sermons and like didn't really have a choice to refute it. And it kind of, I wrote it while I was still attending OCC. It's just a community college, and I started with just kind of like the visual images and just kind of writing off of like my anger, and that was a really great fuel to just kind of start writing something.
فکر میکنم ایده فیلم از آخر فیلم نشأت گرفت. حالا میخوایم اسپویل کنم. اون دیوار جنسیتی که همواره بین مرد و زن هستش، اولین جایی که به ذهنم رسید در سرویس بهداشتی مردون زنانه بود که دیدم همه جای دنیا این اتفاق ثابته و داره میفته و همون دیوار جنسیتی باعث شد که به سراغ این فیلم برم. من فکر میکنم که مترجمم قطع شد ارجنگ که عزیز. حالا امیدوارم که زود حسین به ما اضافه شد.
Hossein, are you here to translate?
فکر میکنم که قطع شده حسین. حالا بریم
He's here.
من خیلی کوتاه دوباره میگم. از همون آخر فیلم ایده من اومد که یک دیوار جنسیتی بین زن و مرد هستش و این دیوار جنسیتی که سرویس بهداشتی چیز خیلی ساده است ولی عمومیت داره به تمام دنیا و از اونجا ایده فیلم در ذهن من نشأت گرفت. مرسی.
If I want to talk about the idea behind my
All right. Sorry about that. Looks like his connection isn't great. Hopefully. Oh, okay. If Hossein reconnects. Oh, you're here. Okay. Can you try to say what you were going to say again?
Sorry. I should just change the connection. The idea behind my film stems in the wall, the last scenario and last scene of the film. I mean that sexual wall, which is just between men and women, just as a symbol of just a lavatory toilet, which always we can see that men and women are separated, and we can just see this as a symbol of sexual wall, which is, I think, which exists in all over the world, which is something that always we try to just make difference between men and women. and this, I can say, sexuality issues, which is always among them. It's a kind of somehow
Okay. I think that we got. I think we got the gist of it. So, all right. Moving on. Let's see. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to move on to some individualized questions, but I wanted to start with one for Jiyoon, which is basically so Hudson Blooms is like, it's a very brief. It's like 4 minutes, and it tells its story without really any dialogue. It's very visual and like emotional, obviously. So I guess my question is, can you talk a little bit about how that conception like came about, where you knew that that's what you wanted to do, whether there was any sort of like any of that came out of necessity, or whether you always knew you were going to, it was what the final product was going to look like, and talk a little bit about the sort of your confidence that what you wanted to convey would be conveyed through that.
So the reason why there wasn't any dialogue was because I was actually trying to apply to Chapman University. Um, but I think the confidence just kind of came in like wanting to tell my story as best as I could with like the film inspirations that I already had. I think like at the time, one of the films that like was inspiring me was Requiem for a Dream. It was that TV scene where the mother was in front of the screen and like it just kind of had that dramatic moment. I knew that I'm I'm like a visual person. I do a lot of illustration and photography, so it's kind of part of like just my regular practice. And so I knew that I wanted to do something that was visually striking, and I felt like it was in line with the kind of subject that I was going for. And I think I was just inspired by queer films too. Like at the time, like blue is the warmest color was also like an inspiration for me before I kind of I don't know, before like I guess like there was more critical like there's more criticism behind like kind of a straight man like telling like a lesbian story. Um and I think I just like I don't know, was inspired by seeing like I just like women depicted as like women depicted with just like full personalities and I guess like seeing their like sexuality, and I guess I haven't really seen it in like Korean films, so I kind of wanted to bring that out. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is for Prem, and I wanted to ask basically, I would characterize basically knowing very little about Nepalese like culture and life. I would personally, based on just watching it, I would characterize your film as being at least seeming very authentic to like a real world experience. And my question is, um, like, what sort of audience did you have in mind, first off, when you created this film, if any audience? And second off, um, how did you go about kind of depicting this authentic life uh, in a way that would make sense to that audience or to any audience?
Actually, the story is set in the rural village of Nepal, especially in Nepal, in the rural parts of the world. Mm, Most of the women get arranged marriage. Um, the story is set few years back, so um, um, they, they will hire, they will deprive, and they will not they will not share the feelings they had with the parents before get married. The marriage will be arranged by their parents with the strangers. So they will accept whatever the proposals the parents would prefer them. As she went to after her marriage, she went to the house of her husband, but she's not so much affectionate with her husband, and slowly she developed interest with her sister-in-law. The story in Nepal, we can see some similar cases in the rural parts, no. The director Ashok Aryal has observed some of the things from the rural parts, and being woman, she bring the stories of the woman to have some sort of authenticity to the narrative and the people and the culture we have existing in Nepal. Regarding the audiences, in my mind, when I decided to produce it, uh, the story have some sort of universal elements that everyone can connect and everyone can feel, um, um, because the movie is woman centric, though it can connect to the man perspective also. So I think it has it can connect, and it can have the larger audiences from different parts of the world.
Right. So in a sense, you felt that it was in some ways a universal
Yeah, yeah.
kind of story. Okay. Um, okay. While we have Hossein here, I have a question that's just for Sajjad. Hopefully, we can answer it. My question was, in this short film. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Uh, moving on, and then if Hossein comes back, we can touch on that again. Okay, this one is for Akeem. Uh, my question is, so the thing that's interesting to me about your short film is that it's not explicitly a romance, right? It's sort of on its surface, it's essentially a story about a friendship, and yet it is pretty evident to me, at least, and I seemingly to you, that it is a queer story. So, can you talk a little bit about um, whether you intended to tell like a queer narrative, and basically what your thought process was with kind of making it more of that sort of story?
Yeah, at the start, yeah, I didn't intend it to be a queer story, but I wanted to cast it in a way that I wasn't looking at anyone's gender or sexuality. I just needed two people who could connect through different cultures, and I knew I wanted the story to have a Filipino lens. So for me, as long as my main character was Filipino, I was being true to the script that the story that I wanted to tell. And this process evolved because I also knew throughout the pandemic, Twitter and other online media became like a refuge for a lot of queer people, and that's where they form relationships online. And I think there was something beautiful about what was going on, like in the midst of all this chaos and death and darkness. There were people who were forming relationships, like deep friendships, and maybe even like deep love for each other. And so, yeah, I was open to that. And then after I casted my main lead, after a conversation, it was evident to me that. And so I worked with my producer, and I also worked with my actor as well, just to to make it more queer and to make it more about these two men who may be falling in love, but I still wanted to preserve, like, at the end, it's still about like two people forming a deep connection. It doesn't have to be love, but it's something that's deep and profound.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Well, hopefully, if Hussein's connection works again, we can get back to that last question. But in the meantime, I'll move on to some more general questions. So, it seems evident to me that in a lot of these short films, I guess in some ways all of them, we have characters who are uh, very aware of the space that they occupy, and I guess I'm curious about whether that sort of characterization kind of went into how you decided to shoot, how block, all of these things, like direct your actors. Like, how much were you thinking about like the characters' sort of self consciousness and consciousness of the spaces that they were occupying? Given that it seems like that's a major part of the stories in a lot of these cases. And again, whoever wants to jump in.
I guess like for my film, I tried to play with the levels, just like kind of focusing on what's like at the bottom of the screen or what's in the middle and what's at the top to kind of guide me as to how to um like how to how to sorry, I'm like I can't think.
No worries.
But just trying to uh define these characters by their placement of the screen, the bottom just being how like low they feel, and the top being how high they feel, and kind of like blocking the characters so that like there's one scene where the pastor was taller than the Hajun, and that was just to kind of signify their relationship and who has more power, and just kind of commenting on that.
Yeah, I could go next. Yeah, from when I started writing this piece, it was interesting to see how the internet is this very vicious place, but also this very kind place. And so throughout the writing process, and when I was directing Jorik, my actor, I was constantly aware of how paradoxical the space of the internet can be. So I was balancing it out. Like we wanted to be critical of the internet still and the culture around it, but also like open up to people that yeah, there are great and kind places within this sphere. And so it was just a matter of yeah, and we were also I was also inspired by films like short series like Game Boys that really talked about how and the internet can be a sphere for connection, and that was like what I wanted to put in my script, and that was like, and at least Jorik, who is my actor, he also is has a following on Kumu and on YouTube, so it was also working with him to get some input on how that exactly works, how people interact on these music spaces.
Or can I have the question again?
Yeah, I was sort of just asking about how what your process is for like logistically and also creatively, like depicting characters who are very aware of the spaces that they occupy, or to put another way, characters who are sort of intentionally feel out of place in the spaces that they occupy.
No. In the short film, we look few other actors for the main character, and she and we get to know through a friend of mine, and we meet each other and we discuss about the character, and she shows interest to do act in this movie, and after then we'll took her on the location, and because being a Nepal, we have the similar culture, no? We become the same caste, and she can adapt the culture what she's doing in her daily life, no? And by looking that, it's not become so difficult for her to perform the act, because she knows the culture and everything. The space is also she knows some sort of closeness to the space also, so it's not become so much big question for us, for the space and for the culture. what she's doing in her life. Thank you.
Okay, I really don't want Sajad to just be sitting on the sidelines, so I'm going to try to ask the earlier question that I wasn't able to ask in Farsi and see if we can get somewhere, because I feel like this connection thing isn't going to work. So I'll ask it in English first, which is what I was going to ask was, and Hossein is here. Hossein, can you hear me? Are you here? All right, I'll just ask it in English first. There in your film, there is a lot in the narrative that basically remains unsaid. Like we're there with the characters and we're experiencing the story with the characters, but we're not. You're not holding our hand through it. You're just letting us see what is happening to them. So I wanted to know kind of how your feelings about having faith and trust in your audience to know what you're trying to do with the film and know what's happening. And I'll say it in Farsi if I'll attempt to say it in Farsi, or unless Hossein is available. Okay, it seems not. So okay. سوالی که میخواستم بپرسم این بود که تو این فیلمه خیلی از اتفاقایی که میفته توضیح آنچنانی نیست واسه for the audience. یعنی اتفاقات که میفته و ما میبینیم، ولی یعنی توضیح نمیشه که دقیقاً معنیش چیه یا اینه. سوالم اینه که یه خورده اگه میتونستی راجع به با یه جوری trust میکنی که آدینست میفهمه که چه اتفاقی داره میفته.
یه مثالی میخوام بزنم. ما توی فیلم اودیسه کوبریک هم اینو میبینیم که یه استخون رو پرت میکنه و تبدیل به یه فضاپیما میشه و تبدیل به سفینه میشه. سینمای امروز دنیا دیگه احساس میکنم لازم نیست شما همه چیز رو هی توضیح بدی و شاید با یک فریم، با یک دیالوگ خیلی از پاسخها رو بدی. سعی کردم تو این فیلم بیشتر سراغ این برم که با خیلی چیزهای کوچیک چیزهای بزرگ رو بگم. یه جمله معروف هست که میگه چیزهای بزرگ از چیزهای خیلی کوچیک تشکیل شدن. من بیشتر دنبال این بودم. خیلی دوست ندارم لقمه رو حاضر و آماده به مخاطب بدم. مرسی.
Okay, so if I understood that correctly, basically what Sajid is saying is that we're at a place with film where it's kind of unnecessary to hold the audience's hand through things, and his intent with this short film was to say a lot with as little as possible. So a single frame, a single image, a single expression could convey a lot more and more effectively than if you were to just tell your audience what was going on. And also there was a comparison to 2001: A Space Odyssey, where like I think there's a scene that it cuts from a bone being thrown in the air to a spaceship, and so like the language of cinema is such that we know what that transition means, and we don't need it to be explained. And the same thing applies in this case. Hopefully that was a good translation. But yeah. Okay. I think we can move on. So a question that was really on my mind having watched these, and generally having watched the sort of the LGBTQ showcases that we've done in the past, something that I always think about is there's this tension between intending to depict the struggles of queer characters, or just the experiences. I guess they don't always have to be struggles, but the experiences and struggles of queer characters who exist within a particular tradition or a particular culture on the one hand, and on the other hand, knowing that there's sort of a Western lens through which your work is unavoidably being seen. And I suppose it's not as much of an issue for some as it is for others. Like those of us existing in the United States, it's like way heightened. But I'm curious how you sort of navigate that tightrope of like depicting things in the way that and depicting things that are often unpleasant and often depict like people like struggling against something that might feel oppressive in some ways, while at the same time knowing that you could potentially be playing into certain narratives without intending to, if that makes sense. And again, if anyone has a response, they can jump in.
Yeah. Actually, in Nepal, still the people who becomes LGBTQ community, they are not still accepted by our community, no, and their families also. Slowly and gradually, the awareness has been increasing in the city. uh, even in the rural parts, we cannot see such type of acceptance by the family members and by the society. So they have to hide their sexuality, and to pretend the society see or he does not belong to that community. And those community, the people belongs to those community, are trying to raise their voice for their rights. And slowly we can see similar glimpses of changes in the city parts, also, but not wholly accepted by our community, no? So they have some sort of sufferings um, still exist with them. Yeah.
Uh, I guess I can go next. It's an interesting question you posed because I didn't think about stereotypes. I didn't think about playing into the Western narratives when I wrote the script. When I wrote the script and when I had this idea, I just wanted to talk about the struggles that a lot of musicians and a lot of Filipinos face at that time, at the height of the pandemic. And even when it came to the graphics and all the hashtags that you see, those are actual hashtags that were used to protest like what was going on in the Philippines at that time. And I didn't want to play for the Western narrative. I never had that in my mind. I just wanted to make it in a way when Filipinos see this, whether they're in the US or in the Philippines or wherever they are in the world, they can see, wow, this is my struggle as well. Um, I honed in on queer musicians after some several talks, but yeah, at the end, I wanted to be universal and I wanted to speak specifically towards Filipinos, and so yeah, it never crossed my mind to about the Western narrative. So it is an interesting question, but that's where I came from.
June, if this question maybe doesn't, you don't have an exact answer for it, I can sort of rephrase or come at it from a different angle, which is, in your case, while you did talk about earlier how this was obviously inspired by personal experience. Um, I suppose that there isn't anything necessarily, and I guess by design there isn't anything necessarily like, it's not necessarily an Asian or Asian American story like on its face. So I guess instead of asking about that tension, I could ask instead, um, how were you thinking about the contexts in which this story would be perceived, especially given the like religious nature of it, and how, kind of the role that religion might play in you know Korean culture versus in the United States, or whatever like frameworks people might be looking at this through.
I guess I was just sorry, could you repeat the last thing I said about the context between Korean religion and just
Yeah. Well, I just meant for example, because though that might be an intersection that you were familiar with. Like, I was curious if you were thinking about how like the story might be like seen, like with those contexts in mind, or if you were not thinking about that, or whatever you might have been thinking about.
Yeah, I was definitely concerned with like depicting the church as this like all-encompassing power, as something that was like very absolutely like evil. That was like something that I was trying to not like because there are nuances with the church, and I don't believe that like all churches are evil. Um, I really just tried to keep that in mind while creating the film. I'm not I hope that like it doesn't come across in a way that is very absolute, but I tried doing that by focusing on some themes around like trauma and PTSD about I think just like off of like personal experience as well, and trying to like center around just these themes so that it's less about I guess it's less about saying that all churches are kind of like evil, or just like making a comment about like I don't know how pervasive some Korean churches can be. It's just this one experience, and yeah.
Okay. And I guess that can lead into this next question as we sort of start to approach the end of the Q&A. Given that, given what you were just talking about, June, and what and Akeem, like you mentioned earlier, how this idea didn't start as a queer narrative, but you wanted to kind of turn it into one. Like, I'm curious, both in terms of wanting to tell like LGBTQ stories, but also in just whatever sort of realities you all want to represent. When you're sort of conceiving ideas for films such as these that we're screening, would you say that you feel obligated or a responsibility to tell a particular type of story or tell your stories in a particular way? And like, could you like elaborate on whether it's yes or no? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I do feel that I have to tell a story in a particular way because, first of all, now that I'm here in the US, my point of view would always be a Filipino point of view, and it would always be different from that of an American, of someone who grew up here in the US. And so I know that if I want my stories to stand out, and I know my stories do stand out because of my different perspective. So I always come back to who I am as a person, where I come from, and it's always when I get a new idea, even if it's something that's rooted here in the US, something that's situated here in the US, I always come back to it. How do I feel as someone who grew up in a small town in the Philippines? How do I feel as someone who worked during this time in the Philippines, who worked in a media company in the Philippines? I always come back to that question, and from there I find ways to tell the story in a different way, and in ways that surprise me, but still I come to it and say, hey, that is me. That is me in some way.
I feel like I don't have like a responsibility to tell like queer stories or just even Asian American stories. I feel like it's important for like Asian Americans or just anybody to really talk about their personal story. But I feel like I guess like I like think about like just like kind of boxing yourself in, and sometimes like believing that you are responsible for telling like a certain story, like a certain narrative, like it can it can really like just trap you, and I feel like you can't be as expressive as you want to be.
Confusion try to depict the story of woman. So we can see the the change of society in Nepal through through this short film, because the story, uh, I think we don't have so much movie that belongs to LGBTI community. Slowly, this movie will try to show the try to address the issue of that community also. So I think we have one movies that is made before 5 or 6 years ago. The feature film, we can hardly find the story from addressing the issue of those community. No, slowly we can see the changes in our society also. No, they are coming in the front scale, and I think as a filmmaker, it will be good to address the issue and to address the suppressed desire. I think as a filmmaker, she tried to bring the story that will be unique and to the world also, from the perspective of Nepal. No, it will be new for the Western audience also.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to ask that last one to Sajid as well, just because I want everyone to be included. But وقتی داری فیلم میسازی احساس میکنی که باید داستانهایی یا ایده هایی به خصوصی داشته باشی که برای to convey to your audience، یا فقط داستانهایی که خودت دوست داری همینجوری yeah or
اه، احساس میکنم فیلمساز در همه جای دنیا هیچ وقت فیلمی رو برای دل خودش، برای شخص خودش نمیسازه. همیشه سعی میکنم فیلم هایی که میسازم مخاطبش کل جهان باشه و هر کسی تو هر جا بتونه باش همزاد پنداری کنه، ارتباط برقرار کنه، کانکت بشه. این برای من خیلی مهمه که هر مخاطبی با هر دیدگاهی رو با خودم همسو کنم. فکر میکنم این کاملترین جوابی که میتونم بدم.
Okay, so I think the idea here is that filmmaking isn't it cannot only be about doing what you want to do and making and creating work that satisfies you, but it has to connect you to the world at large and communicate something to the world, in addition to just being something that is your interest. If that makes sense. I think I got the idea. Okay, so we're just about out of time. Well, we basically are out of time. But before we wrap up, if you could all just let us know what's next for you and how we can follow your work going forward.
Yeah, surely.
Go ahead.
I'll share my next work with the next edition of Philadelphia Asian Film Festival. I think we'll be in contact with you, all our friends, and even Arzhang. Surely, I'll share my next works with you in the next edition.
Okay.
Yeah, so I am currently working on a documentary. I'm editing one. I'm still in school, so as a master's student, but I'm hoping to get the thesis done, and it's going to be about karaoke in the lens of sci-fi. So I hope I can get that done.
I'm also currently going to school, but I'm trying to work on a script right now. We'll just see where that goes. But I'm just editing like a fashion campaign and just trying to get into other avenues of film and just exploring that.
I hope I can meet you in better days. I'm so sorry for what saying, and I wish in the future my movie winner in the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. I hope see you soon.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here. And you can go to path.org to buy tickets and look at our schedule and all that stuff. But thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you so much. Glad to meet you all here. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.